it's the next level.
No, we broke out of your little game. That's how we got here.
No. Wrong. Every step you took to get here. Lamentus, the void. I paved the road. You just walked down it.
Hey panelists, welcome back to the show. I'm Mark.
And I'm Steve.
And this is going to be a spoiler-full podcast about the final episode of Marvel's Loki. That would be Season 1 Loki. And the synopsis for this episode, well, the title is, For All Time, Always. The clock is ticking in the season finale, which finds Loki and Sylvie on a date with destiny. Which is pretty funny.
They certainly were on a date.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely a date for them. A lot of mischief going on there. But, yeah, we're going to go right into our initial thoughts. Steve, what was your initial thoughts?
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it even more the second time. And, I can't, it's probably not going to go down necessarily as my favorite, but, Disney, I commented on this on the Facebook thread that we had. Disney's got some good security on their stuff because nobody knew that Loki had already been, approved for a second season or confirmed for a second season. And so the fact they had that card in there, or they inserted it right at the end, whatever, to tell us, was really, really cool. And, I mentioned also they kept under wraps, and I won't say it here just in case no one's watched the second season of The Mandalorian. If you haven't watched the second season of Mandalorian yet, I don't know what you're doing waiting, but there's this huge reveal in the last episode of that they were able to keep secret. Like, I can't believe they kept it secret for as long as they did.
Maybe that's Disney's new thing now. The end of every second season is going to be something really cool to look out for. So hopefully we get this for something else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, WandaVision was only a mini series for its time, a short-lived mini series. And this is actually a season.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Did they mention a movie for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or was it? Did they?
Yes. They didn't make it. They didn't make an announcement until after the last episode aired that Captain America 4 is coming.
The movie, yeah,
the movie, right,
and not a season. So that was another one-off, if you think about it, as another mini-series, as
right.
It was.
I don't think they've announced a second season. I don't know how they would do a second season of that show. It would be different for sure.
They would have to call it Falcon and the White Wolf,
or Captain America and the White Wolf.
Oh yeah, Captain America and the White Wolf. Yeah, yeah.
But I think you're right. I think Captain America and the Winter Soldier, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it was for most of the run, was just a limited series, and this is the one that's going to go into a second season.
Yeah. But, yeah, I have to agree with you. I really did enjoy it. Not the best of episodes, but very well written for me. And there was a hell of a lot of dialogue in this episode, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But that was needed to set up the villain in the multiverse that we have to endure within this new phase of Marvel. So we finally get the background to this character, at least. A lot of people who are not comic fans will get to realize who this character is, but we never get his name. But it is Kang the Conqueror, and I'm glad that Marvel didn't pull it was Loki all the time, or Loki all along, just like in WandaVision with this episode. I'm just glad to know that Tom Hiddleston still has a job as Loki, though. He's definitely going to be, and I know that it's a definite that he's going to show up in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, they said. So.
Yeah, that announcement was earlier this week or yesterday or today. I can't remember. I saw that.
Yeah, so I heard about that a while ago, but it was all rumors, but now rumors are set aside and we got facts.
Yep.
And I really like the fact that, we get more Tom Hiddleston. So he must be happy. He's got job security there.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move right along into our top 5, our highlights of Loki, season 1, episode 6.
I knew everything up to a certain point, and that point was about 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds ago.
I think it's your turn to go first.
Sure. Well, my number 5. Well, I loved how Miss Minutes was manipulating for He Who Remains. The files that Ravonna gets from Miss Minutes are, I think, a new map of the timeline where she can do something to probably meet up with a different version of Kang. Because if you look at it, with her at the very end when she was talking with Mobius, it was all about opening up for free will, or basically she was talking about being in charge. So maybe it's her way of trying to get to the He Who Remains, or the Kang, that version of Kang, to work by his side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing I got out of that. But I just find it how manipulating that little clock is. It's so cute.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And it's kind of similar to what my number 5 is, sort of, but is talk about the few people that we don't know, we don't see them at the very end. We know, and you already mentioned Ravonna, and I'll talk about her in a second. But the last image we have is Sylvie there on the floor in the Citadel at the end of time, and we don't know what happens to her after that. She still has a TemPad, so she can still go somewhere if she wants. Maybe she's going to corral Eliath. I don't know. Then you mentioned Ravonna, and she talks about the fact that she's going to go off in search of free will. And I didn't pick up on it until you just said it, but you're right, because she said the only one who really has free will is the one who's in charge.
Yes.
So that's a good take on your part. And then we still don't have a 100% that C20 is dead. We never saw her die. It was always off screen. And so it's possible that she could come back, or a variant could come back. I mean, we saw a variant of the wimpy little guy as a hunter in the new TVA. So we could definitely see a variant of C20.
Or, we saw the other variants of Mobius and B-15.
B-15, right.
Yeah, as well. Yeah, this is, I'll state it later, but, literally, I'll state it again, that they, this opened up multi-layers of not just of all these variants, but of the TVA itself. So that's something to look forward to, and I don't think it's going to end here. I think it's going to continue on in the MCU to some degree. I don't think we're going to see them all the time. I think we're going to be getting more people that we haven't seen before, or just even different versions of the people that we've already seen before. And that I'm not just talking about villains, but I'm talking about superheroes as well. So it's going to be very interesting now with this new MCU that's coming out. Well, to move on, number 4 for me, well, finally we get Jonathan Majors as He Who Remains, or also known as Kang the Conqueror. And he is old, and you can tell he is tired, but left the fate of the multiverse in Sylvie's and Loki's hands, but we know how that ends up. But it was such an interesting plot twist of how he knew everything that was going to happen, but only up to a certain point. And I love how he just kind of shifts, saying, I'm being candid right now. I fibbed. I knew everything up to about 10 seconds ago. And it's the truth. And it's him just being very honest. But I just love that one line, and he says it to Sylvie after she stabs him to kill him, and he goes, I'll see you soon. Meaning that a version of him will be seeing her soon. And according to what he says and what Loki was referring to, he's going to be the worst thing that they've ever had to deal with before, so far. Because, I'm thinking they're going to lead up to some sort of major event at the very end of this phase of Marvel or the MCU, which is going to be pretty cool if it's what I think it is.
So Jonathan Majors is my number 4 as well. You know, I loved him in Lovecraft Country. I thought he was really, really great. And I laughed every time the way he kept getting away from them and all their attacks, how he popped up in the elevator right there with the apple, and half his lines are delivered while he's chewing, while he's eating. And I'm just like, oh, that was an interesting choice by the director to go with that. But I really did love it. You know, his story had me convinced that it's partly it's at least a little bit, there's a little bit of truth in his story about how he was able to conquer all the other He Who Remains and become basically the last one standing, and that if they kill him, all these variants of himself are going to come back from the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of get that whole, and this is where I got confused about where he was going to show up later and how this ties into the Doctor Strange movie, how this ties into the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie, how is this going to tie into season 2? You know, what are they going to do in season 2 if they resolve all these other things prior to that? I don't know. And it's great. I love that we have a mystery ahead of us. We don't know where this is heading. We don't know the plot of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We don't know we don't completely know the plot of any of these movies really going into them. And so it's going to be interesting to see how we progress with Spider-Man No Way Home and all these other movies now that we've established the existence of a multiverse.
Yeah. I just find it fun that we finally get something, and I'm so glad they didn't pull that whole, you know, it like the rumorville before this episode came out, everybody thought it was going to be a different variant of Loki all along. But the coolest part is that there was every clue to, within the last 2 episodes before this, leading up to it, that it was Kang all this time. And I'm just really enjoying that fact. And which leads me into my number 3, which is the history of He Who Remains. And I thought it was very enlightening. And like I stated, I love for the fact that you didn't have to be a comic reader in order to understand this at this point, because he literally gives you his history. He gives you the reasoning for him and why he created the TVA. And I love the whole backstory element, and it's a thing for us to reflect to as the movies come up, to go back to if we need to. So anybody could go back to this episode to brush up, because be like, oh, who is that guy? Oh, he showed up in this movie now. So now we could go back. But I really love for the fact that this is, you know, within the comics, they don't say it here, but it's a version of Nathaniel Richards, who is a related or a descendant of Reed and Sue Richards, or Sue Storm from the Fantastic Four, and he explains the version of himself from Earth from the 31st century, and we get to know his origin, and he explains all that has happened, and the Kang War, and this is something that was pulled from the comic books directly, and this was our introduction to him. It was small, but gives us something to look forward to, I think. You know, you could actually look at that whole little synopsis. Very similar to the way that, if you remember Guardians of the Galaxy 2, when, what was it, Kurt Russell's character, Ego, explains to Peter, you know, the history and everything. You saw the little clay, remember, and then how it created kind of visuals within his world. Kang, or He Who Remains, does the same thing, giving them an idea or an enlightenment of and visual storytelling, which is really cool because it's a lot easier. If you're a more visual person, it's a lot easier to take in. But I'm looking at how this is going to lead, and like I said before, it's going to lead us to different variants, and I'm hoping it leads us to Secret Wars, and that's the new phase of Marvel or the MCU that they lead to. Not the 1984 original comic run, but the one that came out 7 years ago with the multiverse or multiple versions of all heroes and villains, where they had a battle planet.
Oh, good. I'm glad you said that, because every time you brought up Secret Wars in the past, my only knowledge of Secret Wars is from 1984.
No, there was one several years ago where, and
there's a more recent one. Okay.
There's a more recent one. They went back to it, and they had multiple versions of heroes and villains, and they had a battle world for each.
Okay.
And you saw a female Thor. You saw Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker, or you saw a different version of Venom, and all these different people. These comics at that time, and the only difference was the villain in that particular series or run was literally Doctor Doom. Because we all know at the very end of Secret Wars 2, which was in the mid-'80s, just after, which didn't really do well, it had the Beyonder living on Earth and everything, but it kind of led to the idea, or at the very end of the first Secret Wars, that Doom had the power at that point. And I think that run, or the run I'm talking to that came out 7 years ago, had like this whole scenario where like Doom was one in charge, kind of similar to like the Beyonder, but I think they're trying to utilize Kang in this way for the fact that they're using, because basically if you look at it, Endgame had created all this whole time jumping, all this going through and changing time. Now we've branched, and with Loki, it created the multiverse, and there's going to be multiple versions or factions, so they could easily use time and multiverse applications to create their own little world. If they bring the Beyonder in, it'd be interesting, because if everybody remembers or wants to go into it, the Beyonder, who is this godlike creature in Secret Wars that creates all these battle worlds, so to speak, or pits heroes against villains or heroes against heroes, he kind of, in the second iteration within Secret Wars 2, takes the physical presence of the one person he admired most and thought was the strongest, and it was Captain America. So think of Chris Evans with black hair. And I would laugh if that is the outcome, but I don't think it's going to be that at all. I think it's going to be Kang at a certain point. But if it goes to that route and they change it up a little bit to make it a little different from the comics, to make its own for the MCU, so be it. I love the idea.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I'm sure that's what they're gonna do. I mean, they that's what they've done all along, is they change a little bit. So
yeah.
So my next one is just He Who Remains makes this offer, to Loki and Sylvie to let them kind of run things, and it ends up not mattering whether he was being honest or not about, like you mentioned, about how he felt old and tired, and he didn't know what their answer was going to be, and I'm assuming that's because Sylvie does kill him. And so that's when we get these timelines branching off, and it was interesting. This marvelous fight that we get between Loki and Sylvie has so many points that I'm going to get into in my further ones. But I just for a moment wanted to think about what would have happened if they had said yes. What would he have done if they had went, okay, we'll take over for you? Where was he going to go? What was he going to do? At that point, I wonder if he would have just stopped and went, well, I didn't really mean it, that I was going to let you take over or something, because like they called his bluff or something. I'm sure he totally expected they were going to kill him.
I think it was a 50-50 chance, I think, with him. Mm-hmm. It was either or, and he was prepared both in his mind, because if you think about it, he was thousands of years old by then, and he's lived this and was controlling, according to what we know, he's been controlling this TVA and going through this whole Kang war, as it were, with himself, and had to deal with all that process. Now he's to that point of, well, of all things, these two got past, and it's either A, they're going to kill me, or B, they're going to continue and move and sit in my throne. Mm-hmm. So he knew it was a 50-50 shot. But whatever the outcome was, I think he was pretty much prepared for it.
Right.
But his thought was, if they kill me, well, they're screwed. Basically,
Right.
in his mind. My number 2?
Yes.
I love the dialogue, just like you said before, with Loki and Sylvie, as well as the fight together. I thought it was really engaging, and I like the fact that how Loki fesses up to who he is and how he has changed. So I think this was great in like character development and how they were able to get Loki to this point. Even though it was pretty quick to be similar to Loki we see in the end game. And but this is at that point where this Loki is going to move on to be, I wouldn't say an anti-hero. At this point, he's going to become a hero. So, and I think he just had to come to that reasoning. He still might be an anti-hero deep down, but I still think he's going to be the hero in the MCU, or a hero, as it were. And I'm surprised. I'll be surprised if and when he gets to see Thor, how he reacts to Thor.
So my number 2 is just as I talked about before, that fight between Sylvie and Loki. I loved how they switched in between using their blades and magic. They kind of went back and forth. I love how there was this whole dialogue, like you said, while they're fighting about trusting each other. And I've got a couple of quotes towards the end that I'll talk about that. But it really to me, it seemed like Loki wasn't trying to kill her. She definitely wasn't trying to kill Loki, because that's what stops her, is when he jumps in front of her blade. And he throws his blade down, and her blade is at his throat. Yeah, she's about to slice He Who Remains' throat, and then she drops her blade, and they kiss. And but the only thing I didn't get was, even in the second watch, I never caught where she picked up the TemPad, how she got it from his desk, because I guess he had left it sitting on his desk, and during one of those times when she was fighting, she was able to grab it, and that's how she sent Loki back to that other time zone and time TVA. And I love that you mentioned at the beginning the whole "see you soon" with that little wink from him was just great.
Jonathan Majors really hit it out of the park at playing this character.
Yeah,
and they let him play it as him, gave him that classic look with the purple cloak of Kang. Now we don't see him with that weird mask or whatever it is that he has on his face that we know from the comics. I'm sure in time we will. That'll be just another version of him, maybe the Conqueror version of him. But I think Disney, Marvel at this point, let him play it the way he needed to play it. Even though it was kind of aloof, kind of strange, especially with that apple scene. And I just love, like, maybe he was like biting the apple from the tree of life or something and mocking things. I don't know. But the way he was so cavalier about it, and and then he kind of drops that facade at that point where he didn't know everything. I also like the fact that, in the very beginning of the show, we got those, they had all the recordings, all the typing out of every event that Loki and Sylvie or whoever, and he had all those papers.
Yeah.
That he knew everything because of those papers, but they end after a certain point. He knew nothing up until that point. And then he had to be very honest with himself and to them. And that was so endearing. I just love that.
Yeah.
Well, for me, my last one, my number one, that would be the last scene when Loki is sent to a different universe within the TVA by Sylvie. Which has a version of how He Who Remains in it. I can't stand using the He Who Remains. I'll just refer to as Kang.
That's fine.
And that is the leader at that point of the TVA instead of the Timekeepers. And Mobius has no clue about Loki and thinks he's from analytics because they never tapped Loki, I guess. Or he wasn't even on their radar of that particular TVA. So, or for his Nexus event at that point. Meaning that there are going to be, I've said it before, multiple versions of the TVA amongst all the multiple universes that are out there. And like I said, I'm just looking forward to seeing, maybe we get Mobius in a movie. Maybe he shows up with within Shield at certain points, and they have to go back to a Shield point, and then he shows up as maybe a Shield agent or a TVA member undercover as a Shield agent. I'm just thinking so many things through and possibilities. It'd be so cool.
Yeah, it sure would, and that's my number one as well. Is just that final scene with Loki running through the TVA, and he finds B-15 and Mobius. And I did the very first time I watched it, my ears kind of pricked up a little bit when B-15. We overhear her saying, "Does he just want us to let them all branch?" And I was like, "Huh? Who's she talking about? Do they already know that there's the one guy?" And of course, then like you said, Mobius calls him an analyst, or thinks he's an analyst, and they realize he's not an analyst, and so they call for security. And Loki sees that statue where, in apparently this universe, he's not hiding it. He's definitely showing everybody that he's the one who's in charge of the TVA.
Yep.
So I'm excited to see where that takes us in season 2. If something, and like I said, like you just talked about, there's so many possibilities they can do at this point, and anything we say would just be speculation.
Oh yeah, that's all we are left with right now until the next Marvel property comes into a movie. We already had Black Widow, which is completely that we're going back in time, and all that did was literally just give us a snippet of literally, because it was supposed to come out before Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Yeah. And that just led us into introducing us to pretty much Val with that end credit scene.
Yeah, which I'm still confused about, because it seems to me like if Black Widow was supposed to come out before Falcon, and we talked about this on our Black Widow coverage, so I don't want to dig too deep into it.
Yeah.
If they meant for Black Widow to come out before Falcon and Winter Soldier, that end credit scene would have been super confusing to everybody who watched the movie, going, huh? Who is this person? And there would have been all this speculation, and then of course it would have been confirmed in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I guess that was how they meant it to be. But
but you have to realize, in this time of where everything got halted and they had to go back and reduce shots, or actually do new episodes because they had to stop production.
Right.
So it kind of changed everything to some degree, but I think they're trying to level it up to that point where they're going to give us out the content, because we have a lot to look forward to between now. Multiverse of Madness is not coming out until I think March.
Yeah, it's definitely 2022. And then Shang-Chi and Spider-Man.
Yeah, to look forward to. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to look forward to within this new phase, which is going to be pretty cool.
So we've got some notes here.
Yep.
So my first one is just I laughed every time the way Loki and Sylvie got into their little fighting stance every time. Like when the door opened, and when Miss Minutes pops up, which I jumped every time when Miss Minutes, hey y'all, but they get in their little fighting stance, and the elevator doors open, they get in their fighting stance, and I was just like, it was comical the way they kept getting into their fighting stance and then not fighting.
Yeah, it was funny though how Miss Minutes just jumped out and gave you a jump scare at one point.
Exactly.
Well, the windows behind He Who Remains back as he talks to Sylvie and Loki look similar to almost like a face. If you look at it, there's 2 eyes and a mouth. But it also looks like something out of Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, if you think about it.
Yeah, I got that vibe from those windows, yeah.
Yeah, but behind him is, through the windows, you see the multiverse and how it's branching off, and we see it constantly, and it is surrounding him, if you think about it. It's all the multiverse branches. So towards the end, we see all the branches and how they just start growing and become so erratic they explode. So I'm looking forward to that.
So my next one is I find it interesting that WandaVision leads us into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. This movie, from what we know in the news, this movie kind of leads into Doctor Strange, but also is going to lead into Ant-Man and the Wasp, and how the Black Widow movie did the exact opposite. The end of the Black Widow movie is going to lead us into the Hawkeye television show, or we're assuming that's what that end credit scene was meant to.
I'm assuming that it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I already mentioned it before when we covered Black Widow, I'm thinking of the Thunderbolts, that's a possibility, and that's who Val is working for, is Ross at that point, or a version of Ross. Who knows? Because we don't know where the hell she came out of when she just popped up right behind.
Yeah.
Yelena. At that point, I made the joke of like the TVA portals and how she just shows up out of nowhere. It's like, where did she come from?
Yeah.
But it to me that was leading towards the Thunderbolts, and then obviously Hawkeye points to that particular series that's going to come out, and for all we know, it could be the Young Avengers that they're tying into as well, because as we know, Hawkeye teaches his daughter in the new the Hawkeye series. So Haley Steinwell, or I forget her name. She's plays his daughter, and she literally becomes the next Hawkeye. But whether or not we lose Hawkeye, if Clint is eliminated by Yelena, who knows? But I'm looking forward to it. At least it gave us and propelled us towards a lot more stuff. Not exactly in a way, shape, or form that we wanted, but at least we're going to get it. Next up for me would be, well, when He Who Remains mentions himself, he mentioned himself almost as Immortus.
Mm-hmm.
And Immortus was, within the comics, to a lot of the enthusiasts in there, wasn't a Kang, but it was somebody who's representation of the Timekeepers. And Kang at one point made a deal with the Timekeepers, as I remember, if I remember correctly. You guys could correct me if you want. But where he wanted to help out and fix the timeline as it was. And I'm glad that they kind of stayed true to that. But this is like that version of it where he was thinking, because Immortus in the comics was somebody who cared for what was going on within all the branch times and things of that nature. And then Kang was there to help. So at this point, I think they just kind of combined the characters, which is pretty cool.
So mine, we've already talked about my confusion and stuff about what this
Yeah.
is leading to. So we can just get into quotes if you want.
Sure.
I loved there at the beginning when they're standing outside the Citadel at the end of time, and Sylvie or Loki says, "No, nothing to say," and Sylvie just says, "That'll be a first."
For him, yeah.
Yeah.
This one comes from He Who Remains, and when he first talks to Loki and Sylvie and describes Loki to him, you are the flea on the back of a dragon. I just like that little. I was like, okay, that's a good way to.
Yeah. I love it though. You held on for the ride though. So
yeah.
My next one is when they do meet He Who Remains. They say that name to him. He goes, "He Who Remains." She's still calling me that? Creepy, right? And he's saying all that as he's munching that apple. And just...
Last one for me would, this would be Mobius to Ravonna as they're in her office when he finally gets back and he confronts her. Friends across time, allies to the end. And it's basically using her own words against her about her betrayal to him when she what was it, Brent, like, got rid of him. I forget what they call it. Pruning. Yeah.
I've got last couple here. When they're all talking, when he's trying to make his deal, when He Remains is making his deal with Loki and Sylvie, he says, "We're all villains here. We've all done horrible, terrible, horrific things, but now you get to do them for the right reason." And I thought that, or for a good reason. And I thought that was just an interesting way of bringing his offer to them. And then my last one is just while they're fighting and they get down to the point where she asked if it was all a ruse, if it was all a con, and why they can't trust each other. And he says, because you can't be trusted, because you can't trust, and I can't be trusted. And that really comes down to, that's what the two of them are. She can't trust anything he says because he can't be trusted. So it's going to be interesting seeing what season 2 leads us to.
Yeah. Well, she's the yin to his yang, if you think about it. They have that attraction to one another. Mm-hmm. That kiss seemed, though, a little bit forced, if you think about it.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with her in the next season, I guess.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any feedback.
No.
Okay. We already talked about the news that they have confirmed it's returning for a second season. The only other news we have is our friend from TV Podcast Industries, Derek O'Neill, gave us a posting or a link to an article of Kate Herron and Jonathan Majors talking about the character of He Who Remains and referring to him as Kang in that article. So they're basically confirming that, yes, he is a version of Kang, and it's already been confirmed that he was going to be the villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp's Quantumania. But the whole article basically is just talking about how they weren't sure if Disney was going to let them reveal him, Jonathan Majors, as playing this part in the Loki, who this part is in the Loki TV show. So they were really glad they got to be the ones who revealed that for a major movie. And as I talked about earlier, it's interesting that we're getting TV shows leading into movies and movies leading into TV shows now. That's how this whole Marvel thing is going to work, I guess.
Yeah, well, that was the original theory and thought when they created Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when they were on ABC. And they kind of marketed it that way, but never did anything with it. I've said it before, that was my only issue with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, mind you, I never completed the series, but they had their moments where I had characters in that show that never seen the light of day in the MCU, but they, however, were able to give us Lady Sif, or we got Nick Fury once within the seasons that they had each. And I was so happy that we finally did get them. Or we got, of all things, the Absorbing Man too. He was in there, and we got Deathlock, but we never saw them within the MCU itself, which I was really looking forward to. Like even with Ghost Rider was in there as well, and it was a version of Ghost Rider. So there's hopes that we get the more traditional Johnny Blaze version of Ghost Rider, not the second version. I'm forgetting the character's name in the comics, but he was like
I don't know.
He was a race car driver or something, or a speed driver or something like that. But they wanted to do that to make it so that it intertwined and worked together, but it just never happened, and that was my only letdown in that show. That was really what it was. Very good. It was very well written.
I never watched it, so I can't comment.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. You can always see it.
So we have some podcast recommendations. I've talked about them before, but the Nevers podcast from Culture Inject Productions, they are now covering the show Firefly. I think they're going to be doing an episode every 2 weeks, moving into the movie Serenity. I sent them a voicemail a little while back. I don't know if they're going to get it to play it or what's going on. I may try to send them one for the next episode if I can. But yeah, the Nevers podcast from Culture Inject Productions.
Yep. Well, as always, we like to plug stuff that's on the network, the Next Level Network, and that would be Wilhelm with Ben Beck and his multiple guests that he has for each different category of what he's covering. I'm not sure exactly what's coming out this week, but I look forward to whatever he's going to be talking about, and you could hear all that on the Next Level Network. Next up would be House Podcastica when they come back. Right now, they're kind of in a little bit of a hiatus until Walking Dead come back. But in between The Walking Dead now, when What If comes out on Disney Plus, they'll be covering that on House Podcastica. And I highly recommend that you check them out as well as listening to us in TV Podcast Industries. It's really cool to get a different take or thought on these shows. And I'm looking forward to see what Jason has to say about What If, because I'm looking forward to that as well. Now that we got another teaser trailer, which I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
For YouTube recommendations, I would definitely say Malfunction on YouTube, and that would be Sean Clark when he does The Thing with Two Heads, Horror's Hallowed Grounds, as well as Hollywood's Hallowed Grounds. So you could check him out. In Hollywood Hallowed Grounds, he covered the filming locations of Little Darlings recently. Horror's Hallowed Grounds, he did a few others. I think it was Scream recently. And then The Thing with Two Heads with him and with Sean and Chris. Check that out too, because they just have a good time. And they also have a podcast.
All righty. Well, hopefully you are listening to us on your podcast player of choice, whether that's Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcast, or wherever you like to get your podcast. If there's an opportunity to give us a review, please go there, give us a good review. We'd love to get notification of that and read it on a podcast or future podcast. We appreciate that. You can check out our website, which is panelstopixelspodcast.com. You can also submit your feedback on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/panelstopixels. You can send us a good old email at panelstopixels1@gmail.com. That's panelstopixels1, the TO is spelled out right in the middle, and the number 1@gmail.com. We also have a YouTube channel, which is Panels to Pixels Podcast. Go on there, subscribe, give us a thumbs up.
Yep, definitely.
Where else can listeners hear you, Mark?
I can be heard on Adrenaline Cinema Podcast and the Pyrocore Entertainment Network, and we cover action films, adventure films, thriller, and suspense films. Anything, basically, that gets your adrenaline going. So this week, you could look forward to hearing Kat and myself, and we are recording, and it's a definite John Wick 2, so check that out when it comes out. And just go to our Facebook page, which would be facebook.com, Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. Or just go to the Pyrocore Entertainment Network.com and check that out there.
All right. And I send voicemails to our friends' podcasts. That's where you can hear me.
Yep. So, well, that was our coverage of Loki Season 1, Episode 6, the finale, and I really enjoyed it. I liked having, it's like, unfortunately, it's the last one, but we have What If to look forward to, I think.
Yep. Couple of weeks.
So, until then, I just want to thank everybody for listening. I'm Mark.
And I'm Steve.
And this was Panels to Pixels, and we'll see you on the next panel. Good night, everybody.
Good night.